I don't understand what they're saying. It's not clear. You're talking to me. What do you mean? We're having a conversation here. You're talking to me, answering any questions, stuff like that. No, I'm not. You're telling me you don't understand what I'm saying right now? No, I had no idea.
This is Theater Talk. I'm Susan Haskins. Our guest is really a genius at what he does. He has a remarkable skill, and he's brought it to Broadway in one of the most entertaining shows this season, The Two and Only. Here to introduce him, my co-host, Michael Riedel of the New York Post.
I thought Jay Johnson's show, Two and Only at the Helen Hayes, was really one of the best things that I've seen in a long time. He brings back a kind of lost art of ventriloquism. He is a great ventriloquist. He's a very entertaining stand-up comic, and you know him, I suppose, if you've been around long enough, from Soap, but he's now a Broadway star, and we're delighted to have him here on Theater Talk.
Hello, Michael. Hello, Susan. Nice to be here.
And congratulations on the success of the show.
Thank you. We're having a great time.
All right, now I want to ask you, I think the world of this show, and ventriloquism is very interesting. But there is an aspect of it which I still find a little bit creepy about ventriloquism and ventriloquists. And that show gets into it, particularly when you start talking about your mentor, a fellow who was a ventriloquist and who carved dummies. And you begin to discuss with him what ventriloquism is about and the dummies, and then the dummies come to life while you're talking to each other, and then the two of you are talking, but the dummies are going on. Are you guys a little batty to be ventriloquists? Do you see these puppets as real human beings after a while?
Well, you know, that's hard. Does an actor think of his character as real after he's played it for a long time on the stage? I think they do. And, you know, let's take another thing. Let's suppose that Art Steving was a musician, and he played the violin, and I played the violin. And we come in, and he says, let me show you my violin. He starts to play. And I pick up my violin, and I start to play. And somebody walks in, and we've got this wonderful concert going on. People go, that's beautiful. Yeah. But you take one more step, and you make that violin speak as a human and personify it, and then it becomes creepy. You know? Yes. And I understand that people feel that way, but I feel like it's the music. We're playing music. He's a musician. I'm watching his technique. I'm watching him do his jazz. I'm going to come in and fill in with my jazz. And so, yeah, we're all talking at once, but we're playing music.
No, let me take you to another place.
Sure.
There's a segment in the show where you talk about how your old, not dummy, what we call him.
Wooden American.
Wooden American. Squeaky, that when you got the job as Soap, that they said, well, Squeaky's too sweet a looking puppet, we're going to give you a harsher puppet. And you have a wonderful scene where you discuss that Squeaky's not getting the part with him.
Right. Now, I'm not saying that scene took place in reality, but see, there's a dialogue going on between Squeaky and me and Bob and me and all the characters all the time, because that's the way you think. You know, you're thinking about your art form. So no, that's just the personification of what my emotions went through, because this was a big change. I mean, Charlie McCarthy was always with Edgar Bergen from day one. Right. Jerry Mahoney was always with Paul Winchell, and Danny O'Day was always with Jimmy Nelson. I never thought there would come a day that there wouldn't be Jay and Squeaky.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's like breaking up Laurel and Hardy or Abbott Costello.
Exactly. And so after Soap, I thought, well, I'll just use Bob on Soap, and then Squeaky and I will go out and do our thing, and we'll still become Jay and Squeaky. And he couldn't.
Bob was a star.
Somebody said, Jay, seeing you with Squeaky is like you cheating on your wife. And it was true. That's what I'm known for, and that's who it is. And Soap was such a cult hit, and everybody was into that show. So eventually, Squeaky just kind of retired.
Where did the interest in ventriloquism come from?
I don't have a good answer for that. I don't know. It's something I always was fascinated by.
As a kid growing up? You were listening on the radio?
I think maybe on the Ed Sullivan Show, you know, all the ventriloquists that were there probably. And I do remember the day my brother said, do you see that guy with the puppet? And I go, yeah. And he said, he's working that puppet. And there was this, wait a minute, kind of like the scene I play out at Big John Sparky. I said, are you kidding me? No. He said, and here's exactly what he said. He said, there's a bunch of buttons back there, and he just punches those buttons. And that was the first time I had realized that this guy might be doing the puppet. The voice was, oh, I hadn't come there yet. So anyway,
and it's amazing. The kids don't see that now, really, and so you know that we just saw ventriloquists all the time and television.
Well, you know, talking about a dying art form, I'm convinced there's no such thing. There's no art that's ever going to die as long as there's an artist that's going to do it. Now, what has happened is maybe there are artists that have chosen another art form, but it's never going to die. It's always going to be there, particularly ventriloquism, because it's not stage magic. It's a psychological thing. So, and speaking of that,
Now, can we coax Bob to come?
let me see if I can. You know,
I'm sure he's got some thoughts about you know, what it was like to work with you on
he
this
is
episode.
a Broadway guy, so he is not used to being
sleeping.
up. You know,
So, hey, come here, boy.
You know, I hate it when you get your hand in there.
I know, pal.
Yeah.
You say, Susan?
Hi, Susan.
Oh, hi.
Can you see it? Is this Michael?
This is. Are you okay?
I don't know. Yeah. Boy, what time is it?
Here, let me. You want some water?
No, I'll work.
Okay, all right. I don't want to work.
Welcome to Theater Talk, Bob.
Well, thank you. Are we talking theater?
We're talking theater.
I'm glad to
exactly.
talk theater.
I was curious to know, Bob, do you have any theater credits? Did you do any Broadway or musicals in high school or
My
anything?
uncle is the stage at the Schoenfeld.
I didn't know that.
It's true.
He's actually the stage.
Actually, the stage. Yeah. Good guy. He's been there more than I can say.
And were you always in love with the theater when you were growing up, Bob? I mean, you listened to a lot of old cast albums. Were you kind of a show queen puppet?
Excuse me? Did you say show queen?
Yeah, a show queen puppet, yeah.
No, I don't think I could say I was a show queen. I was more of a violin kind of guy.
Does that mean you like to play the violin?
No, he's going to be a violin.
Really? I didn't know it.
I wasn't cut out.
It's an early morning to do those kind of jokes, Bob.
I don't care.
Now, Bob, we were
What
talking...
does that guy do? Does he have a job?
Hey, stop. Leave the man alone.
Get a job. He's just sitting there.
That's all right.
So are you.
I guess I am.
Bob, Jay was telling us about when he first met you on the set of Soap.
Boy, it was the best day he ever spent.
Exactly. What was your initial reaction to meeting him? Did you know anything about him? Had you heard about him? Or is he just sort of, a guy...
I was hoping for a girl ventriloquist, but they didn't have one. They did great, had their hand in my back,
Did you have a hand in selecting who your partner would be on the show?
Not a bit. They didn't give me any creative control, and I am ticked off about it.
Well, but it worked out.
Not especially.
Well, we did. No, Bob was there when I got there. And I remember the day I met Bob, we walked in and you were in Andy's office, right?
Yeah, looking at Jay going, oh, crap. This is a guy?
No, we had a good time.
It was okay.
Yeah.
When Soap ended, was there a period of a kind of a lull in your careers at all? And you sort of think, well, what are we going to do with this act? I mean, where's ventriloquism
Yeah,
heading?
you might think so, but not at all, because at that very moment, comedy clubs had just appeared. And so instead of Bob and I starting, at the bottom and being the opening act and the middle act, and then you get on material to be we started as the headliner. So we immediately went into all those clubs as a headliner, and literally, should I tell?
You can tell because it's okay. It's over now.
Okay. Bob and I actually made more money the next year after we left Soap.
Really?
Because we were doing clubs and the
Wow.
sky was the limit. So it was the greatest thing ever happened to us. Yeah. Bob and I went into the corporate entertainment world, which is very high end, and they treat you very well.
And they don't sell tickets.
That's right. They sell tickets. Yeah.
Guaranteed
So
audience.
so it's good. So the last 10 or 15 years before our Broadway show, that's what we were doing.
Bob, are you all caught up in the life of a Broadway actor now?
Well, I am. I've got my own dressing room, and I've got the new cool kids coming every night.
Really? Are there girls at the stage door waiting for you?
Oh yeah, very very nice girls.
Now, but how are you keeping your youthful glow? I mean, you don't go out drinking or anything.
A lot of work.
Yeah.
What kind of work have you done, Bob?
Oh, you see this now on my face? This is exterior latex number 9.
I haven't seen you on the circuit, though, Bob, because, the History Boys, cast the History Boys, I used to see them at all the theater bars like Angus McIndoe, which is just down the street
cut a
from
wide
where
swath,
you are.
yeah.
Oh, you don't know the dummy bars. We got some bars, man. They got some stuff. They got wood alcohol. Wow. Oh, man, I love it.
What's a dummy bar like? I don't know a dummy bar.
Well, you should go with me sometime. You've been hanging around places. A dummy bar, man, they'll make you look cross-eyed. Here's a typical night at the dummy bar.
What? Typical night?
Yeah. 2 drinks, and here's what you do. Do you like it?
Did that hurt?
Yeah, that hurt.
That's it.
Get back.
Yeah, it was going right there.
That's a good trick, actually.
Yeah,
you don't
try
see
it.
that?
Yeah, try it.
We don't have too many guests on Theater Talk who can do that one.
It's something the kids like. This is The Exorcist.
Yeah, they love that.
How do you divide up the paycheck? I mean, you get equal billing and share in the royalties, and is there any tension there?
Is this a paying gig?
No.
No, not this one.
Well, I mean into the stuff at the Helen Hayes.
Well, yeah, there's a little, actors' equity thing that goes on.
Uh-oh.
I don't know why I just signed this out.
Well, Bob, here's the deal. See, I take care of your room and board.
My room is a suitcase.
The board?
You're looking at it.
Okay, I knew it was coming. Sorry. Hey, he can't help it.
There's no representation, I guess, for wooden Americans yet. This is something you should bring up at
I
Actors
think I
Equity.
just start the agency.
Yes.
There's a lot of dummies in the business, but there's no dummy agents.
Oh,
Just agent dummies.
or vice versa. Something like that.
So listen, I want to ask you, how did you just sort of decide to put together, it was started off Broadway, this act, right?
Yes.
I mean, it was a dream of always to be
Absolutely.
on, did you have the idea of coming to Broadway? You thought I could bring ventriloquism back to Broadway?
I don't think the idea was let's do a Broadway show. The idea was let's do a show in a theater. Let's do a theater show. Let's do a theatrical show that's not a club, that's not a restaurant, that's not a corporate show. Let's do a show in a theater where we can use all the colors and all the theater craft, and that was the goal. And then we got really, really nice notices off Broadway, and then they said, you know what? There's a couple of Broadway houses, Helen Hayes being one, that this would fit. And so for us, this is just, an extension of where we wanted to go. And ultimately, we want to take the show around and do it for as many people as we can.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because he's got a big mortgage.
No, please, Bob.
Big mortgage.
I have a lot of mouths to feed.
Yes, you do.
Yes, I do.
But I, as a reporter for the Post, the theater, I often sort of poke around backstage to make sure everyone's getting along. And I'm just curious, Bob, how do you get along with the rest of the cast members in this show? I mean, I get the sense you're the top dog where those guys are concerned, and they know that, right?
Yeah, they know that I'm the guy, and without me, they're nothing. Yeah, that's all. Did you know that I do the voice of Darwin the monkey?
Oh, very good, very good.
Nobody knows what they think Jay's doing. No, I'm back there going, monkey joke, that's what I do.
How do you get along with the talking tennis ball?
He's okay. He's okay. We play a lot. I throw him away. The dog brings him back. Okay. It's okay.
All right.
And how's your feeling about Bob's old partner, Squeaky? I mean, you kind of actually took over
Did he
Squeaky's
say
role in
Bob's
Bob's
old partner, Squeaky?
He said Bob's old partner, Squeaky.
I'm sorry, I mean Jay's old partner, Squeaky.
It's not the ventriloquists that are creepy, it's the reporters that go creepy. Yeah.
They lose their mind, don't they? No. Bob and Squeaky have a great relationship until it comes to the competition for wooden women.
And we got no love lost.
I was curious about the Hawaiian shirt because that's kind of a throwback to the heyday of soap there, a little kind of late 70s, early 80s thing.
Well, it's like I got to wear this or they won't know who I am.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Oh, I think they would know if you were.
Yeah, just riding on the laurels.
Well, we hope we're going to see you at the Tony Awards in your tux.
Well, if we get to the Tonys, I'll buy a tux.
All right, all right.
Well, actually, you don't have to buy a tux.
Yeah, no, I can get one because they got it leftovers on that show, Fantasy Island.
Oh,
got it.
poor
Yeah.
Hervé.
I know.
He was a great guy. Yeah.
He was a great guy. Short, but good.
Yeah.
Well, listen, we're
he
going to
was.
be rooting for you at the Tony Awards. They have this wonderful thing called the Special Tony Award, which is for unique theatrical events. And
Wow.
I dare say that your show qualifies as a unique theatrical
Actually,
event.
I want to be the best supported actor.
Very good, very good.
Okay.
Very good.
All right, Jay Johnson and Bob, you can see them in The Two and Only at the Helen Hayes Theater. Absolutely terrific, informative, entertaining show. Don't miss it. Thanks, guys, for being our
Thank you,
guests
Michael.
tonight.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Susan.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank
Hey,
you.
Susan, you and me, ditch the guy. I think I can do the show with you.
I think that is a great idea.
You got the part.
Yeah, but see, they also told me, the agent told me that they don't
What?
they don't think that you're right to play this Bob.
Well, didn't they like what I did?
No, they liked your audition. It wasn't about your acting ability. They think you're a very good actor.
Well, I think so.
But it's all about the look.
What?
See, Bob is a really mean character, and they don't think you look right to play that part.
I mean, look,
But they told me specifically that it's a compliment, really. They think that you look too sweet to play the part of Bob.
well, get a fucking chisel.
Wait a minute, I got a better idea. A clean break, we buy him out.
Buy me out? You don't buy me out, I buy you out.
With what, Tommy?
Fine, buy me out. It's over anyway.
Last season, I fell in love with our next guest's performance in Jersey Boys. A lot of other people did too, and he won the Tony Award. And he's still in the show, knocking them dead 8 times a week, so we're so happy he's here.
Susan is happily married, but I have to tell you that after she saw Jersey Boys, she called me and she said, Christian Hoff, Christian Hoff, Christian Hoff.
It's true.
She was completely gone. And I have to agree, as Broadway did last year when they gave him a Tony Award for his performance as Tommy DeVito in Jersey Boys. He is terrific in the show, and we are delighted that Christian Hoff is with us here tonight on Theater
Thank you,
Talk.
Michael, and
Welcome.
thank you, Susan.
All right, the Jersey Boys, of course, was the phenomenon of last season and continues to be the hottest ticket on Broadway. But before it opened, there was this knock against the jukebox musical, and everybody thought, you know, here comes another one of these catalog shows, Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons. Yeah. When did you guys realize, though, that you were in something that was going to be a lot better than the previous jukebox kind of musicals?
Well, we realized that at our first table read. We were in La Jolla, California, and Marshall Brickman and Rick Ellis, who you've had on the show. Mm-hmm. It was the first time, literally, we all were in the room together where we heard these words and were able to tell the story. We hadn't met, we hadn't run anything, we hadn't sung together. And we knew coming out of that 3 hours, you know, of reading this play that it was a play, that we had something that was unusual and that was different. Mm-hmm. And so we didn't concentrate on trying to set ourselves apart at all, because the piece did that itself. Mm-hmm. The trick was, like you said, breaking down that wall, getting people to, you know, once they saw the show and understood what it was we were doing, that's how the buzz built so fast, and that's how we, you know, became such a success without pumping money into, you know, or in advance, really.
I think that's the key, though. I mean, in addition to the great Four Seasons songs, very well performed by all of you, it is really the script of the show. I mean, all the characters, yours especially, are rich with texture and depth. And some, you know, the tragic aspects come out, and that must be what pulls the audience in emotionally each night. I mean, you know better than I. You're there. Is that it? They get involved in the lives.
I think that's what it is, and I think that by the time we get to about 45 minutes into the show, they've invested, the audience, have invested their own experience into what we're going through as human beings and as men and as people striving to make it. Right, in their individual chosen fields, or trying to run from the alternative, in this case, perhaps a life of crime.
Yeah.
Or,
in your case.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's interesting, and I think that genuine enthusiasm that we get from the audience has solely to do, by that point, with the storytelling and with these characters' experience. So by the time Sherry comes around,
the big song, the first hit for the Four Seasons.
Basically, the first time we sing a Four Seasons tune that anyone recognizes, right. Or any Four Seasons tune, their first hit, when we perform it on American Bandstand, they're there not only as an audience member of what perhaps they remember or what they're imagining this would be for the younger folk, myself included, and it's just a wonderful melding right then of this great story with why they think they came, which is the music.
And that's when it really.
That's the catalyst, and boom.
Working with the guys, didn't you have this sense at one point, oh, well, you know, we really are a musical unit in and of ourselves?
Yeah, well, that's true. You know, we all are musicians, and I'm in the local 802, and I'm playing guitar on stage every night, and it's just, that's a dream come true.
Do you get paid extra for that?
We'll talk about that later.
It's the Sweeney Todd John Doyle rule, I think.
It's basically, yeah.
Now, you play Tommy DeVito,
yes.
who is... has gone down a path to crime, who is connected with a mob.
Well, not anymore.
But in the play and in his real life, because this is based on his real life, you, I assume, have met Tommy DeVito. You spent time with Tommy DeVito. Yeah. What is he like, and what advice did he give you in playing himself?
When we first spoke, I tracked him down on my own.
Really?
Yeah, and I wanted to speak with him and let him know that I would be playing him just out of sheer respect for portraying another person. Mm-hmm. And he called, and I found him on the internet, believe it or not, an address, you know, and I wrote him, and lo and behold, he calls me, and we had a 10-minute conversation. I was on my honeymoon at the time. And by the end of that 10 minutes, I really had a sense of who this guy was, and not only vocally and just his the way he spoke and his personality, but also who he was in relation to the band.
So who was he?
What did he say?
He's a guy that is all heart and soul. He would protect these guys and did protect these guys for years. He kept them, out of trouble. He kept them fed. He kept them clothed. He bought all the, he got the money to basically support the band at a time when there were a dime a dozen. Every corner bar had a house band, right? Mm. And these guys would, even just to make it on your block was a triumph. And then for this, for their sheer will and force to make it at that time was enough. Mm. Then they're fortunate enough to be introduced to Bob Gaudio by Joe Pesci. That's a true story. And when Bob Gaudio, listened to Frankie Valli at that time, I think he was a kid. He was 17 years old. He said, "This is a voice that I want to write for." And they were just goofing around at this time. They were in the corner, in the bar or whatever, and they're doing. They had a lot of comedy in their acts, a lot of banter between them. It was very old school. Off the cuff humor. They would do characters. Frankie would put a napkin over his head and sing,
almost like a kind of Rat Pack feel,
very,
just
very
friends
much.
hanging out and singing a song, making a few jokes, teasing each other a little bit.
Yeah, what people saw in live performances was very different than what you see on American Bandstand or these other sort of mock presentations, where they might be lip syncing or performing with some kids dancing in the corner.
Now Tommy DeVito, he's been to see the show, right?
Oh yeah.
And what was it like when he came backstage after watching you play himself? What did he say to you?
Well, he kind of looked at me and his eyebrows went up, and he kind of just said, "You do me pretty good, kid." And what was even funnier, before I even met Tommy DeVito, Bob Gaudio and Frankie came back, and they looked like they'd seen a ghost, right? And they came up to me and they said, "Have you ever met Tommy DeVito?" And I said, "No, I just spoke to him on the phone." And they looked at each other and they said, "Well, you do Tommy DeVito better than Tommy DeVito." So I think they thought I was channeling him a little bit. But that's an interesting thing, because I don't work as an actor. I don't work from the outside in. That's not natural for me. I do love to take aspects of real people's lives if I'm fortunate enough to be playing a person that was living and breathing, and if not, then I try to come up with that information on my own. But basically it's an inside-out thing. I find what essences that I have and draw on my own personal life experience to bring characters to life.
I'm interested when you say, though, that you were able to draw on, when you create a character, you draw on things from your own life. I mean, what do you look on in your life you think, I can use this for Tommy DeVito? I mean, where is the connection between Christian Hoff and Tommy DeVito, aside from your involvement in the mob?
Yeah, well, in spite of my mob ties, or in addition to my mob ties, basically, my identifying with Tommy DeVito was not by choice. I mean, you asked me what I did or how I went about it. That's something that's sort of innate. You just sort of go with your instinct on that. And I think as an actor, that's all we've got. In life, we have hope. In acting, we have instinct, and you just gotta rely on what that is. Now, I can't identify it now, but it wasn't intentional. What I identify with Tommy DeVito and his role in the Four Seasons journey, and my journey as an actor every night is that the street smarts, the rolling with the punches, which is critical in life.
To be in your profession. And in your profession, certainly.
Yeah, absolutely, and that constant reassessing and redefining.
If I remember reading a couple of profiles of you, you weren't, a kid to the manor born, so a bit like the Four Seasons. I mean, you had a kind of rough and tumble growing up. I mean, you didn't have friends who were in the theater, or you weren't related to anyone in the theater, so you had to kind of scratch and claw your way to the top.
I guess I did. This was something that I chose to do as an 8-year-old. instead of playing soccer one summer, and my mom and dad were fully in support of that. My father was from Sweden. He was a musician, hairdresser. So I had it, I had it in me, and they supported that. They saw that, and were able to, realize how happy I was under the lights.
Now you've signed for another year, right? So theater goers who can get a ticket to Jersey Boys will get to see you for another year.
Yeah, provided they can get a ticket. So that's the trick. But
it's impossible to get tickets to that show. I think.
It's a difficult thing, even for us on the inside. But it's wonderful. It's a great problem to have, and
well, it's a great show, and you're terrific in it. Congratulations on the new baby and the Tony Award, and much success in the year to come in Jersey Boys.
Thank you very much.
Christian Hoff, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Susan.
Very good luck.
Thank you.
And you begin to discuss with him what ventriloquism is about and the dummies, and then the dummies come to life while you're talking to each other, and then the two of you are talking, but the dummies are going on. Are you guys a little batty to be ventriloquists? Do you see these puppets as real human beings after a while?
Well, that's hard. Does an actor think of his character as real after he's played it for a long time on the stage? I think they do. And let's take another thing. Let's suppose that Art Steving was a musician, and he played the violin, and I played the violin. And we come in, and he says, "Let me show you my violin." He starts to play, and I pick up my violin, and I start to play. And somebody walks in, and we've got this wonderful concert going on. People go, "That's beautiful." Yeah. But you take one more step, and you make that violin speak as a human and personify it, and then it becomes creepy.
Yes.
And I understand that people feel that way, but I feel like it's the music. We're playing music. He's a musician. I'm watching his technique. I'm watching him do his jazz. I'm going to come in and fill in with my jazz. And so, yeah, we're all talking at once, but we're playing music.
No, let me take you to another place.
Sure.
There's a segment in the show where you talk about how your old, not dummy, what we call him.
Wooden American.
Wooden American. Squeaky, that when you got the job as Soap, that they said, well, Squeaky's too sweet a looking puppet, we're going to give you a harsher puppet. And you have a wonderful scene where you discuss that Squeaky's not getting the part with him.
Right. Now, I'm not saying that scene took place in reality, but see, there's a dialogue going on between Squeaky and me and Bob and me and all the characters all the time, because that's the way you think, You're thinking about your art form. So no, that's just the personification of what my emotions went through, because this was a big change. I mean, Charlie McCarthy was always with Edgar Bergen from day one. Right. Jerry Mahoney was always with Paul Winchell, and Danny O'Day was always with Jimmy Nelson. I never thought there would come a day that there wouldn't be Jay and Squeaky.
I mean, it's like breaking up Laurel and Hardy or Abbott and Costello.
Exactly. And so after Soap, I thought, well, I'll just use Bob on Soap, and then Squeaky and I will go out and do our thing, and we'll still become Jay and Squeaky. And he couldn't.
Bob was a star.
Somebody said, Jay, seeing you with Squeaky is like you cheating on your wife. And it was true. That's what I'm known for, and that's who it is. And Soap was such a cult hit, and everybody was into that show. So eventually, Squeaky just kind of retired.
Where did the interest in ventriloquism come from?
I don't.
I don't understand what they're saying. It's not clear. You're talking to me. What do you mean? We're having a conversation here. You're talking to me, answering any questions, stuff like that. No, I'm not. You're telling me you don't understand what I'm saying right now? No, I had no idea.
This is Theater Talk. I'm Susan Haskins. Our guest is really a genius at what he does. He has a remarkable skill, and he's brought it to Broadway in one of the most entertaining shows this season, The Two and Only. Here to introduce him, my co-host, Michael Riedel of the New York Post.
I thought Jay Johnson's show, Two and Only at the Helen Hayes, was really one of the best things that I've seen in a long time. He brings back a kind of lost art of ventriloquism. He is a great ventriloquist. He's a very entertaining stand-up comic, and you know him, I suppose, if you've been around long enough, from Soap, but he's now a Broadway star, and we're delighted to have him here on Theater Talk.
Hello, Michael. Hello, Susan. Nice to be here.
And congratulations on the success of the show.
Thank you. We're having a great time.
All right, now I want to ask you, I think the world of this show, and ventriloquism is very interesting. But there is an aspect of it which I still find a little bit creepy about ventriloquism and ventriloquist. And that show gets into it, particularly when you start talking about your mentor, a fellow who was a ventriloquist and who carved dummies.